May the merits of these teachings benefit all beings. May these words help and not harm. May they clarify and not confuse. May they self-liberate, leaving no trace behind. Good evening, everybody. Hi, Shoho. It's nice to see you. All right, so today we are covering the second chapter of No Time to Lose, commentary on Shantideva. And the chapter is called Preparing the Ground. And, as Pema Chodron says, Shantideva here really lays out in great detail what is needed to receive the Dharma. And I was thinking of the Vajrayana practices, of what is called Nongdro, the preliminary practices, which involve 100,000 prostrations, among other things, and are really said to prepare body and mind for the teachings, for the great seal of Mahamudra. And there's a Tibetan teacher, Lobsang Tashi, that describes these preliminary practices in this way. He says the goal is to turn the mind away from the distractions of the world towards spiritual practice and to purify our basic emotions. If you think of what is really most challenging about practice, there's a teacher who said that the most difficult thing is to remember to do it. But I think so much of it is that membrane, if you will, that what we perceive as a gap between spiritual practice and our lives. And so I think of this, he said purifying our basic emotions, but I think of it really as a clearing out, as a kind of a thorough spring cleaning. You take out of your house all of the unused clothes, the broken tools, the machinery with missing parts, the empty cans of paint, all the stuff that you no longer use, that you don't even know is there. Like that Marie Kondo book, what was it called? The Art of Cleaning Up, something like that. She would say, does this bring me joy? I didn't read the book, I confess, but I know, mainly through spoofs of the book, that you pick up a piece of clothing and you ask yourself, does this bring me joy? And if it does, then you keep it. If it doesn't, it goes out on the discard pile. And our minds are not just our minds, our beings are the same. So much of practice really is clearing out all that prevents us from being in touch with ourselves, for being with ourselves closely in an uncluttered, unmediated way. And it's not that there is anything wrong with the old and broken furniture, with the clothing that we no longer use. It too has its self-nature. It hopefully gave us life at one point. And at a certain point, something happens, right? Something shifts. Either we see differently, something else comes into our lives. And what was useful now becomes an obstacle. when you first move into a space, right, the rooms are bare and everything is open. And so, of course, you can see. And at the same time, it feels a bit cold. It's not lived in. And so slowly you start to bring in what you could say are bits of yourself that you develop, that you cultivate, that you enhance. And you start to live into the space. You start to live into your own life. But because of entropy, things inevitably break down. Because of desire, things inevitably multiply. And so it is useful on a, I would say, fairly regular basis to kind of sort through the stuff of our lives, the stuff in our minds, and ask, as I was writing in that newsletter, that very simple question that the person asked, is this thought satisfying? Does it bring me joy? Is it serving me in my life? And if it isn't, to have the courage and the determination to say, okay, then this goes out. I don't need this anymore. And that is hard. I've been reflecting on this recently, how difficult it is to change. I've said this many times. But how even when you yourself can see, can feel that change is required, how long it can take to actually do that. How long to exhaust all the possibilities, to stop telling yourself, well, maybe if I just shift it a little bit like this, or maybe if I do it a little bit like this, then it will work. Even though the evidence is telling you very clearly that it isn't, it's not going to work. It hasn't been working. And what does it take for that last bit for us to be like, okay, let go. Just let go. Think of Zen and the aesthetic of Zen and how it is so open and so bare, so uncluttered. But it shouldn't feel sterile, right? You know that, you probably know that story of Zen master is in his temple and he's receiving some important government guests. And so he asks one of the monks to clear out the tea house and the paths that lead to it. And the monk, who's very earnest, very diligent, spends a couple of hours just raking the entire yard. So there's not a single leaf left. And he very proudly goes to the master to show him his work. And the master says, almost perfect. And he goes to the tree and he shakes it. And then there's a bunch of leaves, fall down on the path. And then he said, now, just right. Which always made me think, we would hear this story, Daido used to tell it, but then we would always be told, leave no trace, leave no trace, leave no trace. And so afterwards I thought, okay, so those traces are more like what I'm saying, are those tracks, like turtles when they lay their eggs and they do those things, they do that thing with their hind legs. What does a turtle have? They cover the tracks, right? So nobody can see where they lay their eggs. I think of it more like that. So there's no track of me. There's no traces of me left in an action, a conversation. How many times do you have a conversation with someone and afterwards you walk away and you feel like you were just all over it and you can feel it? And when the opposite is true, and you walk away, even if it was a difficult conversation and there's no trace, you can walk away lightly. That's how I think of that, leave no trace. And so preparing the ground doesn't just happen at the beginning of practice, it really is happening throughout. And the nice thing for us is that it is very much built into our practice. So the main way that Shantideva presents, right, as that preparation is to make offerings. And this is a very beautiful, I think unusual chapter. And all of those verses that he devotes to creating these sumptuous, very detailed, very rich gifts in his mind. You know, offering cloths and offering perfume and offering palaces and offering mountains. In all of this, he's saying, he's invoking, he's creating in his mind, and he's saying, here, I give it all away. What a beautiful practice. Think of beginning your day like this, opening your eyes, and then maybe the first thing you see, giving away your art on your walls. First thing I see is the ocean, giving that away, giving a sailing boat, giving the sunrise. To spend 10 minutes just giving the bounty of your life. And if you don't feel there is bounty, giving the suffering. Remember that last chapter, how it ended? With that Pema Chodron quote saying, may the rage I feel for you, may that liberate both of us. Imagine being able to do that. This anger that I'm feeling towards you right now, this jealousy that I'm feeling towards you, or just this despair I'm feeling, this sadness I'm feeling, this grief, this sickness I'm feeling, I offer that for your liberation and mine. And these offerings, as Pema Chodron describes, come and have three aspects. The special object of the offering, who's the recipient of the offering, which in this case is the three treasures, which we can think of as all of reality. The special intention for the offering, which is to cultivate bodhicitta, the mind, the heart of awakening. And the special offerings themselves, which in this case are the sevenfold offerings. And Shantideva lists them one by one. And if you read it, you saw that each one actually has a specific meaning. Flowers, you know, for love and compassion, and incense for discipline. And I thought, oops, I'm no longer offering incense. I haven't offered incense for years. What does that mean for my practice? I mean, I offer these little beads, but I don't know if it's the same. But of course, the important thing is that awareness, right? The intent with which we're giving that offering. As I was reading this, I was reminded of that sutta. It's called the Akosa Sutta, the insult sutta, in which the Buddha, I've told this story before, the Buddha, somebody comes, very rude person, and begins insulting the Buddha. And so once he's done, the Buddha says to him, do you invite guests to your house? And the man says, yes, of course I do. Well, do you offer them, the sutra says it in a very funny way, I can't remember, something like primary goods and non-primary goods. It's a strange term, but do you offer them food? Do you offer them drink? Do you offer them gifts? And the man says, yes, I mean, if I have guests, I do. And the Buddha says, well, what happens if they don't receive it? What happens if you offer them something to eat and they don't eat it? The man says, well, then it's mine. And the Buddha says, just so, I do not accept your insults. I do not accept your anger. It is yours. It is all yours. It is not mine. And so we are we want to be aware of the kind of gift that we're giving. But that even if it is a gift of our own suffering, that it is a gift. I guess that is the difference, that it's offered, a gift is freely given, and it's intended to benefit the recipient. Which in that example with the Buddha, clearly, the man did not intend that. And so the Buddha rejected what was not truly a gift. And we'll return to dana, generosity. We've spoken of dana, that is the first of the paramitas, and it is said to be the easiest paramita to cultivate. But really here, Shantideva is showing that you can offer anything. You can offer a sip of water, you can offer a word, you can offer a mudra, you can offer a thought. And that every time we do this, that tight container, which is ourself, expands. And so every time we feel constricted in some way, every time we feel limited, we feel lacking in some way, you realize that we have the antidote right there. If we're just able to offer something immediately, that constriction opens up. And how different that is, from positive psychology, or even positive, that kind of a church of abundance, where you're encouraged to visualize yourself making $1 million. I mean, Shantideva is saying that's not necessary. Just, you can pick a flower that is dying and offer that. And in your offering, all of that richness comes back to you tenfold. I mean, he doesn't say it quite like that, but that's the implication. That when your mind, your life, your experience is not even, don't even think of it as abundance. It is simply the richness of what is already. That is exactly what you receive. And so every time that anger arises, or as I said, any kind of difficult emotion, when that teacher spoke of purifying our emotions, this is one way to do it. To recognize it and to offer it, to self-liberate it. And as we do this, as we turn our minds, our bodies, our beings towards reverence and towards offering, towards celebration of life, we create a Buddha field. Which reminds me, I have a name. I have a name for a little group. I took in all of your suggestions, and I settled after a bit of reflection on Ocean Mind Sangha. And the chart that we used to do, well, they still do at the monastery for the Ango chart. I mean, there's a scroll, but then there's a chart that has the names kind of in a square format. And in the center, there's a circle that said vast ocean gathering. And I remember that. And then, of course, I remember where I live. And I wanted to continue that, to cultivate what I've been so hungry for, that spaciousness. So, Ocean Mind Sangha. And I just want to say, because this has come up elsewhere, that cultivating a Buddha field does not exclude any aspect of your regular life. You know I knock Netflix sometimes, you know, just like vegging out in front of Netflix, but Buddha field includes it. It includes having a fifth cookie because you're having a rough day and you need something, you need some soothing. It includes having a glass of wine or going to the movies, or, you know, not feeling like practicing. In other words, it's just normal life. And then after offering, there's atonement. And the way that it's spoken of here is, it's very nice how it's broken down in the four powers. The translation calls it confession, which I think for perhaps self-evident reasons I would rather not use. I mean, sin does not really exist in Buddhism, the concept of sin. So I think sometimes the translations are unfortunately tinged with Christian meanings. So I think of it really as harm. You know, even the Gatha of atonement as we know it, all evil karma committed by me since of old, I think of it as harm, right? I think of it as unskillful actions, words, thoughts. And so these four powers of atonement, the first is a recognition of misdeeds with what Pema Chodron's current teacher, Zegar Control Rinpoche, calls it positive sadness, which I thought was really nice. Right? It's kind of like when the Buddha speaks of shame as the bright guardian of the world, right? When we feel positively sad at one of our misdeeds, we don't want to do it again, right? That pain compels us to not ever be in a situation where we will repeat that harm. So that pain is good, is the good kind of pain. Is the good kind of shame. Not that somebody else is shaming you, but that you realize, oh, I misstepped. I created harm. And not wanting to repeat that, you harness the energy of that positive sadness to then shift you towards the second power, which is a reliance on basic wisdom, right? So when we create harm, we're not able to access that. We're not able to access our wisdom. But hopefully there is some part of us that recognizes that that is the ground. We may not feel it in a moment or in a long moment, but that is the ground. So how do we clear the debris? How do we clear what's in the way so that we can stand on that ground? Remedial action, which is a funny way of speaking about it, but you know, it's the taking steps to carry the atonement into action, to actualize that taking responsibility and making amends. Actually, that would be a way to, I think maybe a better way to speak of it, making amends. And then the resolve to not repeat those mistakes or that mistake. To vow, to do what you need to do, to remember at a time when you may forget. You know, and I think one thing I wanted to say about Shantideva, because he is so gung-ho, because he is so often reminding himself, life is short, I'm going to die, you know, why am I wasting my time? I mean, you know, he can really be enthusiastic in his I mean, I see it really as he's inspiring himself, you know, to not forget, to not go to sleep. But he can be, for some people, he can be off-putting. One way that I was thinking about it is that instead of hacking away at your life, right, to shape it into a way that you think it should be, right? So if you're cutting firewood, you cut it with the grain, right? So you have to read the wood. You have to be able to see where the grain is. And you have to be able to aim, which is not nothing, to both have precision and strength, or, you know, more than strength is really that momentum, being able to use your body in such a way to use the momentum. So actually, it's not even so much a matter of strength. It's being able to rely on basic wisdom. Here's the fault line. This is where I aim. So that you're really more and more doing less. As I've described it in the past, you're getting out of your own way. And I think of this for myself. I say to myself, follow the softness. I mean, I really just started saying that recently, but I like it. Follow the softness. I've said in the past, you know, oh, I forgot the word. It's not soften. It'll come back to me. Follow the softness. I will no longer force things into being. I will let them emerge. Gentle yourself. Thank you. Yes, that is exactly what I say. So instead of forcing things into being, you let them emerge naturally, which does not mean not doing anything. The Tao Te Ching says, that which offers no resistance overcomes the hardest substances. That which offers no resistance can enter where there is no space. Can enter where there is no space. Once again, in a moment where it feels you can't see the way, offer no resistance. My teacher always says something like, if what's in front of you won't change, you change. It is a kind of surrender. And then it says, few in the world can comprehend the teaching without words or understand the value of non-action. A term which should be familiar to us in Zen, which does not mean not doing, as I said. It means non-doing, which is active. Do you understand? And then Shantideva turns to death and impermanence. And he spends a bit of time there. There's a number of verses that are really meant to light a fire under our butts. Like, we don't have forever to figure out how to not create harm. And Pema Chodron speaks of the heartbreak, the nausea, Chogyam Trungpa used to say, with samsara. Shugen Roshi would say your disillusionment, your disgust with samsara. Again, not disgust with your life, not even disgust with the world or the state of the world, though you may feel that at times. It means being disillusioned with the endless loops we insist on repeating, hoping that at some point they'll work. Because if there's something we have to say for ourselves as human beings, is we're determined. We are determined. We just have to focus that determination on what is actually skillful, what is liberating. And why the time spent and the emphasis on atonement? Because harm is the greatest obstacle on the path. And so if the word liberation feels too abstract, just think of it more simply. Think of it as, let me do what will not create harm, or what will create the least amount of harm. We want to bring good into the world, of course, but at least to not add to the pain. And that is very doable. I think, if at any point we feel discouraged, if the path feels long or feels rocky, I think it is valid and useful to, as I was saying, I think during the mindfulness class, to break it down to manageable chunks, manageable actions. But in this conversation I'm about to enter, let me not create harm. And then if we can, we practice good and we actualize good for others, creating a Buddha field, which really is, in one sense, none other than following that softness. Simplifying it a little bit, but I think it is, in one sense, all we need to do.